Well, we would like to welcome all of you back to the third Asia Pacific Clean Air Partnership Joint Forum. And I can see that everyone has stayed online, has stayed where they are. Nobody has left. Please raise your hand if you've stayed with us from the opening session to this high plenary session. Okay, I can see that everyone has decided to stay on because this is a very interesting topic that we're going to be all talking about. And for those of you who have just signed in and joined us, I would like to reintroduce myself. I'm Rico Hizon, your moderator for this high-level plenary on Build Back Better for Healthy Air, Healthy Planet. And you know what? When we last gathered in Bangkok, Thailand in 2018, we explored solutions for better air quality and called for strong commitment and cooperation from you, from everyone here, and from all sectors of society. And we had no idea what was coming our way in 2020. But we knew that our planet was at its breaking point. The last year has brought a crisis on a scale that we could not have imagined, ladies and gentlemen. And this is compounded by the environmental threats that you and I, face today. Air pollution in the region continues to be at a very critical stage. It affects us all. However, the most vulnerable people, women, children, the elderly, and the poor with limited access to healthcare services are the ones who are vulnerable. They are the ones who suffer the most. And we are facing a climate emergency with the recent IPCC report signaling a code red for humanity. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we must act now. But how? Let us watch this video on Build Back Better for Healthy Air, Healthy Planet.
Hi, I'm Maya. Because of the pandemic lockdowns, I started riding my bike. It hasn't been easy. It made me wonder, how do we build back better for healthy air and a healthy planet? According to my friend Tina, a fellow biker and a government worker, 4 billion people in the region are exposed to unhealthy levels of air pollution. Tina believes that we can lead the transformative action towards better air quality through the following initiatives. Building back better. National recovery plans should prioritize transformative measures. A green, low-carbon recovery could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2030, helping address the air pollution that impacts the health of people and the planet. These measures also have the potential to create millions of new jobs and $3.6 trillion of additional revenue by 2030 through nature-positive solutions. So far, only 18% of the announced recovery spending can be considered green. Commitments to carbon neutrality. Air pollution and climate change are inextricably linked. Ahead of COP26, the recent pledges for a healthy, resilient, zero carbon recovery through the Race to Zero campaign could also bring significant benefits to air quality and improve the health of millions in the region. Strengthened cooperation. Air pollution is a shared responsibility that transcends city, provincial, or national borders. We must all come together to reduce emissions from multiple sources and ensure the health of our communities and ecosystems. We must work together at all levels, industries, and sectors to prioritize and invest in clean air solutions to protect our health and protect our environment.
Over the past since this pandemic started, I've been biking more, I've been walking more, reducing the carbon footprint. And at this point, I am ordered to invite His Excellency, Mr. Malik Amin Aslam, Minister of Climate Change of the Government of Pakistan, to deliver his keynote address. Mr. Aslam currently serves as the Prime Minister's advisor on climate change, as well as honorarily serving as the elected Global Vice President of the International Union for Conservation of Nature. He has been a strong advocate on strengthening cross-border efforts in South Asia and in the region overall to achieve clean air for everyone. Your Excellency.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would like to first of all thank the Asia Pacific Clean Air Partnership for holding this event on a very important issue. Air pollution remains the biggest killer in the world. It's called the silent killer because we do not know when it is attacking us and how it is attacking us, and the damage it is doing inside of us. Even in Pakistan, it remains one of the biggest challenges that we face as we grow into a bigger economy and into a faster economy. I think it is one of the issues that Pakistan and most of the cities in Pakistan are facing in a very serious manner. So when our government came into power, we tried our best to do two things. One was that we understood that we need to measure air pollution properly. Unless we measure air pollution, we cannot tackle it. So we set up a clean air program under which now we are setting up 10 air pollution monitoring stations in the main cities of Pakistan, especially Lahore, which is really the epicenter of what we call smog, which happens every year in Pakistan. So these stations are being set up through a World Bank funded program, and they will allow us to measure air pollution properly. The second part of the problem is how do we tackle this problem? And for that, we needed to do a study to understand where this problem is coming from. What are the root causes? And that's called a source apportionment study. So that study was done again for the city of Lahore, and we found out that 40% of this problem is coming from transport in Pakistan. The wrong transport, unchecked, unregulated transport, and guzzling all these gases into the air, which cause air pollution. And then adding on to that, the second issue that adds on to that is the industry, which if left unregulated adds to the problem. The third is indiscriminate crop burning. In Pakistan, when you are shifting from one crop to the other, because of climate change, that shifting time has reduced. So the farmers, instead of cutting the whole stubble down to the ground, would tend to burn the crop so that they can sow the next crop in. And the fourth problem, the source apportionment study showed us, is because of cross-border pollution. We also have a plume of smoke that comes across the border when the wind direction is wrong for Pakistan. So we've now tried to tackle all of these issues one by one. On transport, what we've done is we've taken 2-3 major steps. One is that we have shifted our fuel quality from Euro 2 to Euro 5, which is the best available quality right now, and that has reduced the emissions coming out of transport, which uses that fuel, by about 60%. That is already done. Secondly, we have announced an electric vehicle policy, and we want our transport to shift towards electric vehicles, go on to the best available technology, leapfrog to the best available technology. So that is under process. The policy is out. We are encouraging and incentivizing the private sector to take up this mantle and shift towards electric vehicles in Pakistan. And we've set a target for 30% shifting of our transport to electric vehicles by 2030. Number two, we looked at the industries. One of the, within the industries, the brick kilns were causing a major problem. There were about 10,000 brick kilns which were throwing black plume into the air. So we had a very urgent action on that, and we got a technology called the zigzag technology, and we got it installed in all those 10,000 brick kilns within 8 months. This is a record time, and Pakistan has done it. These 10,000 brick kilns have been converted into zigzag technology, which again is going to save the emissions that come out of that by almost about 60%. On transport, as I said, we did the conversion of the fuel quality, the electric vehicle, and we've also trying to set in motion a public-private model for checking the emission of us, and that model is being set up like it is in other countries to tackle this problem. Within the industry, we've also targeted the steel industry, which was throwing a lot of smoke into the air, and we've set up scrubbers on those steel industries, which is again going to help us in tackling the problem. On the crop burning side, we went to our farmers and we developed what is called the Happy Seeder machine. And we did a pilot last year in Pakistan, which was very successful because it allows the farmer to plow in the stubble back into the ground. It saves him one watering, saves him costs of sowing the next crop because the seed goes in with the plowing, and it increases his productivity because there's organic fertilizer that goes in when you plow in back the stubble. So this year we are going to expand that Happy Seeder technology to most of the farmers in Pakistan. And at the same time, we're also using the stick, and we want the farmers not to be burning the stubble, otherwise they're going to be penalized. Now, we have taken all these steps, and we hope that on our side, we will be able to tackle the air pollution problem by taking all these steps. And we're also planting a lot of trees in Pakistan. We have an ongoing 10 billion tree tsunami program all over Pakistan, especially focusing on urban areas also, so that we can grow as many trees as possible which can sequester carbon, but also reduce the pollution levels as they act as magnets for PM 2.5. But finally, the one problem that remains is the regional problem. When we have a plume of smoke coming from our neighbor, when the wind direction is not right for Pakistan, there's nothing we can do about that. So I think that's why we need forums like this, because we need to tackle this problem at a regional level, like ASEAN did for their haze problem. So I think air pollution in the South Asian region has to be tackled on a regional basis, so that whatever we do in our country is also replicated in other countries, and there is a regional dialogue which allows that to happen. So again, I would like to thank the organizers for holding this very important event, their haze problem. So I think air pollution in the South Asian region has to be tackled on a regional basis, so that whatever we do in our country is also replicated in other countries, and there is a regional dialogue which allows that to happen. So again, I would like to thank the organizers for holding this very important event. It's a very important challenge for a country like Pakistan, and I would like to thank you for holding this event, which will, I'm sure, generate new ideas as we tackle this huge challenge of the silent killer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aslam, for your powerful and inspiring message. The best practices and initiatives Pakistan has implemented over the years will indeed guide us during this panel discussion. So in the face of all of this crisis, we actually have an opportunity to redesign, rebuild, and reimagine our societies with blue skies. This is possible if we build back better and employ green recovery measures, strengthen our commitments to carbon neutrality, and continue to work together within and beyond our communities. So where do we start? Where do we begin? We explore these issues with our panel today. Let me introduce our esteemed speakers. Our first guest is a staunch champion for the environment. She is a director of the Economy Division of the United Nations Environment Program. Joining us from Nairobi, let us all please welcome Ms. Sheila Agarwal Khan. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our next guest is the Director General at the Ministry of Environment of Japan. As we all know, Japan continues to lead efforts in raising ambition for clean air in the region through monitoring, regional cooperation, and delivering clean air policy and technology solutions. Let us all please welcome Mr. Yutaka Matsuzawa. Matsuzawa-san, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Rico.
And up next is a passionate and inspiring advocate for protecting children's health from the impacts of air pollution. A former teacher, she became a clean air advocate after her 9-year-old daughter, Ella, passed away in 2013 from a rare and severe form of asthma. Let us all please welcome Ms. Rosamond Kisidebra, co-founder of the Ella Roberta Family Foundation. Rosamond, thank you so much for joining us on the panel. Thank you, Rosamond. And rounding up our panel is Dr. Karen Tuxen-Bettman, Senior Program Manager for Google Earth Outreach and Project AirView. She works to help nonprofit and public benefit organizations use Google's mapping tools to address our world's most pressing problems, including air pollution. Dr. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today, to all our panelists. So Sheila, let's start off this conversation with you. Why do we urgently need to scale up clean air solutions in the Asia-Pacific region?
Rico, you said it actually, because the extent of air pollution is growing. And in this region, it's very worrying. There's a State of Global Air 2020 report, which showed some 500 deaths globally from air pollution. 45% of them are in the Asia-Pacific region. You also said the situation we have where air pollution is exacerbating our vulnerability to COVID. And we're seeing that more people are affected much more negatively, you could say, from COVID when they're in an unhealthy environment. So it is a worrying picture. We're seeing 92% of people in the region are breathing unhealthy air on a daily basis. And the IPCC report says exactly that. Unless we deal with that, not only are we exacerbating our risks to climate change, but we're exacerbating our own health.
Sheila, you have 30 years of management and technical expertise, and you've seen the ups and downs through the years. Tell us, where are we right now? Is there progress or none?
There is progress. I think we see it. We see it, in fact, much more recently, we're seeing a very big growth in e-mobility. The Excellency from Pakistan said, you know, Pakistan is putting in the regulatory environment to be able to incentivize e-mobility. And we're seeing it across the globe. That's becoming a big trend. Another trend we're beginning to see is a phase out of the fossil fuel industry for clean energy. We're seeing much more investment in the clean energy space. We're also seeing at the local level better opportunities and more trends towards cleaner cooking, towards more sustainable agriculture. And we're seeing the big investment players coming in, the big banks, the investors, including the pension funds and other institutional investors wanting to invest in let's say investments that bring sustainability, but at the same time profit.
But if there was no COVID, we did not face this health crisis, Sheila, would there be more investments? Would there be more progress taking place in beating air pollution?
So we were seeing a bigger growth in investment prior to COVID. I think even now we're still seeing that there is investment. Of course, COVID is let's say taking funds that in terms of where we could have been. But the green recovery that could have happened or should be happening is not at the level that we would have envisaged. Maybe less than 10-15% of many countries' COVID or green recoveries plans are not actually spending on sustainability. it could be a lost opportunity if you think about it, because here is a chance to say, we need to recover, countries are investing and other countries are lending in terms of how do countries build back better? How do you change the economy? Here is the one chance that in a way COVID is bringing to us, but many countries are not taking that opportunity. So we're seeing countries locking themselves into unsustainable infrastructure. On the one hand, that is going to keep us having air pollution, and on the other hand, that is actually going to lock us into investments that will not be practically viable in the long run as financiers and all start to pull out.
In the early months of 2020, I mean, up until maybe the end of the year, Sheila, the implementation of restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19 resulted in short-term reduction in some air pollutants. Are we seeing some kind of sustainability here?
You're saying in terms of, could you repeat that again?
Well, I mean, of course, with the health crisis, I mean, in the early months towards the end of 2020, we saw, of course, restrictions, curbs to spread the spread of COVID-19, but it also resulted in short-term reduction in air pollution. Are we seeing some kind of sustainability here in lower air pollution levels as a result of COVID?
So, when COVID first hit and we had lockdowns globally, of course, all of us were sitting at home. So we weren't on the roads, busy driving to schools and to work. Everything was shut down. We were seeing, of course, a lot less pollution from the transport sector. We were seeing a lot less pollution from different industries. But now we're coming out of it and we can see it building back again. So we're seeing the emissions coming back. So maybe those short-term wins, if you could call it, are not necessarily sustaining as we're moving back into in a way back to business as usual instead of back to a different way of living, working, and recovering from this whole situation.
Matsuzawa-san, I would like to ask you about the Japan experience. What actions has the country undertaken, or what actions has it taken to reduce air pollution in the country?
Thank you much, Mr. Rico. Thank you very much. Japan experienced the rapid economic growth that began in the 1950s. However, because the lack of appropriate pollution control, Japan consequently suffered from severe environmental pollution in air, water, and other medias, which led to serious health damages of the residents, including vulnerable peoples. For this reason, the government of Japan has established environmental standards for pollutants that cause health hazards and enacted numerous environmental laws to set measures for individual pollutants, including the Air Pollution Control Act, enacted in 1968. We have continued to make steady efforts, including working closely with the local government who have on-site regulatory authority to ensure the effectiveness. As measurement against air pollution from stationary sources, each facility is imposed the regulation on emission of soot and smoke. For measurement against emission sources from transportation, we have enacted regulations to set a limit of the amount of exhaust gas for each newly produced vehicle. In addition, in the specific areas such as the Tokyo metropolitan, where the achievement of environmental standards along roads was poor, the stricter regulations are set to reduce the total amount of nitrogen oxide and particulate matter emitted from vehicles in the specific area. To achieve the target, the emission standards are imposed not only on new vehicles, but also on the vehicles in use in order to promote substitution from old vehicles to new ones. Because while the regulation on individual vehicle became stricter year by year, more old vehicles exhaust more pollutant than new vehicles. Furthermore, in addition to the vehicle emission control, we have been continuously strengthening the quality regulations on fuel through the Air Pollution Control Act regarding the permissible limit of sulfur content in diesel fuel. We will gradually tighten regulations in line with the progress of desulfurization technology for fuel and oil refineries, which made measures against exhaust gas from diesel vehicles easier to implement. Recently, it has also become important to promote low emission vehicles such as electric vehicles. These combined efforts have led to our current clean air environment. In particular, the achievement rate of environmental standards for sulfur oxide has already exceeded 90% in 1998. Nitrogen oxide has exceeded 90% in 2005. SPM has exceeded 90% in 2004. And particulate matter 2.5 has exceeded 90% in 2018. But now it is almost 100% for all the targeted substance except for chemical oxidant. Over to you.
Yes, Matsuzawa-san, considering the current issues faced by this climate crisis and other problems that surround it, including COVID, how can scaling up solutions for clean air contribute to our climate agenda?
I think the political leadership is very crucial. In my country, Minister Mr. Suga, he declared the national target to combat the climate change, and in his declaration, we will achieve the net zero emissions by 2050, and aiming to reduce the national greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in 2030 from the 2013 levels. Also continuing strenuous efforts to the 50%, which was firstly declared by the Prime Minister Suga last October. And after that, I think the industries and also the financial sectors, their attitudes drastically changed. And I think at this moment, for instance, electric vehicles demand is going up, and renewable energies, transition to renewable energy is accelerated.
Thank you so much, Matsuzawa-san, for those responses. I'll be getting back to you in a little while. Rosamund, are you there? Hi, Rosamund.
Hiya. Hello, everyone.
How are you today?
Very well. It is 5:30 in the morning from the UK.
I know it's early. It's dark and early in the UK, Rosamund, and we really appreciate that you're joining us here today. And, you know, on December 16, 2020, Rosamund, after 7 years of campaigning, there was a landmark decision ruled that exposure to air pollution was a factor in your daughter's death. And share with us, this has been a long and emotional journey for you and the family.
It really, really, really has. Even yesterday, myself and my surviving children, we had to pause. It's the impact that seeing your child suffer that stays with you. And it's to highlight to people when we talk about the detrimental impact of air pollution, it's like a slow suffocation. So try and imagine children suffering, fighting to breathe. I think a lot of people find it difficult to actually picture. It took Ella 28 months, long months, before she finally succumbed to her illness. And it was the resuscitations, rushing her to get her on oxygen, the panics, her screaming, mucus filling her lungs over and over again. So that's what I try to highlight to people. When we talk in these forums, sometimes it's very difficult to actually imagine the impact on these children. We all imagine they will just take the inhaler and they will be okay. No, my daughter was in ICU 5 times. And we all know, due to COVID deaths now, what ICU means now for adults, let alone children. Children haven't been that badly affected by COVID, which is a relief. But we can't poison our children. And 90% of children in Southern Asia are breathing unpolluted air. And one of the things I wanted to highlight to people, it is the everyday exposure, what we don't see with the naked eye. And before we actually know it, these children will be ill. You'll be rushing them into hospital. And that is what I try to get across. So it's the drip, drip, drip. It's the, children are not suddenly going to become ill. But once they do become ill, I feel it is a point of no return. And that will be my message to people. The exposure is what we need to look at.
And, Rosamund, and it's not only children who are asthmatic. It's also many adults here in Asia. My wife and my son are both asthmatic, and I can feel what you feel. And how can we accelerate actions? Because we just keep on talking about initiatives, programs, but how can this be accelerated to protect the health of our families?
Well, we need to look at what China has done. There are solutions. Since China started its war against air pollution, there has been a 29% reduction in the particulate, the tiny, 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 tiny particles. This has added 1.5 years onto the lives of everybody there. And these are the things we need to look at, and we need to sustain them. We do know what the solutions are. People have already mentioned electric vehicles. One of the things I've noticed talking on these panels, universally, it doesn't matter whether it's Africa, Western Asia, the one thing they all have in common is transport. So the sources from different countries do vary, but one thing they all seem to have in common is transport. So that is something we all need to do. And the WHO, they will be bringing out new guidelines. Now, if we implement those worldwide, we will increase life expectancy by 5 years. It's imperative that governments actually act now and introduce these guidelines and stick to these targets, because humans are suffering.
And Rosamund, what can you recommend to your fellow mothers and, a lot of concerned citizens who are watching us right now, who are seeking justice where air quality levels exceed standards?
I think I would suggest to mothers all over the world to actually demand monitoring, because that's what the coroner found out. I know his ruling was specific to the UK, but having looked, there is a lack of monitoring in specific countries worldwide. Mothers should demand monitoring so they will know what their children are breathing in, and they would demand action. And to governments everywhere, This should be a priority. They have a legal duty to protect the health of their citizens. And as you mentioned, asthma is a killer and there is no cure. We focus on asthma because it's a respiratory illness, but let's be honest, it is linked to everything. We've seen the studies. There's been about 70,000 literature reviews. Cancers, strokes, obesity, dementia, these will only go up. And we now know from COVID now, don't we, that when the air is cleaner, we can all breathe better. So when we say build back better, can we please not go down the same route we already have? Because already, I think we have noticed the levels are rising again. Can we not repeat what we have already done?
Thank you so much, Rosamond, for sharing with us your story and your sentiments about this ongoing issue of air pollution. Karen, let me get over to you now. I'd like to get the view of Google Earth. You know, we celebrated the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. What is the role of businesses such as Google in addressing air pollution?
Thanks, Rico. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that companies and businesses can do to bring innovation to the air quality space. I'm struck by what Rosamond just said about monitoring and using their companies and businesses can use their assets and their abilities to help add additional monitoring to tackle air pollution around the world. For the past 10 years at Google, I've been this project called Project AirView, where we've basically made an effort to bring very detailed air quality maps to scientists and to cities and policymakers, and ultimately to everyone, to level the playing field so that everybody has the same kind of data that they're looking at and monitoring over time. Across the globe, we started equipping street view cars, our vehicles that are usually intended for map making. We started equipping them about 10 years ago with air sensors to measure particulate matter and NOx and other pollutants. And to date, we've measured more than 100 million street by street hyperlocal air quality measurements. And we're building these hyperlocal street by street air quality maps that we then share the data and we share the maps back with scientists. So they can add their scientific rigor, of course, very important, but also to cities to help them understand their baseline levels, to add more monitoring in cities, to pinpoint policies. I mean, sometimes, you need more detailed maps to understand where to put clean air zones or where to add additional bike lanes, which bus lines should be electrified first. If you had to, rank them, how do you rank them? Being able to start where the problems are the worst or tackle the pollution in neighborhoods that need it the most. These kinds of really detailed maps can help. And so, I think that, that's just one example, but I think companies can use their abilities. Another thing we're trying to do is put more air pollution data out there in Google search and maps so that people can just understand the usefulness of knowing air pollution levels and the impacts that they have, so that everyone is just kind of more aware overall. So yeah, I over the years as I've learned more and more about air quality and how Google can help, I've seen other companies do the same to add that innovation and technology to the field.
Karen, does developing Asia experts and scientists have access to all of this data?
Yeah, all of this data is available, and it's really interesting because you can pair it with a lot of satellite imagery that's continuously streaming. There's satellite imagery on NOx and on particulate matter. In fact, we've been working with UNEP and some scientific researchers over the last year or so to use satellite imagery that's continuously streaming down into our cloud product, our Google Earth Engine tool that allows scientists to do remote sensing analysis on it. And our partners at UNEP and the scientific researchers we're working with them are building this daily 1 kilometer surface level PM 2.5. And they're validating it and publishing it. But the whole point is to just help support decision making at the local level. And the more that data from the ground, like monitoring data, combined with satellite imagery and other types of big data. It can be really powerful, adding information.
Most of our delegates joining us today for this high plenary session, Karen, are from developing Asian countries. How can they basically harness digital technologies such as Earth observation and artificial intelligence to help bridge their gaps?
So the same satellites, well, for the most part, the satellites that are orbiting our Earth take pictures either daily or monthly, or in some cases even hourly, depending on where they are and where they're pointing down. And so there's all this satellite imagery streaming into different clouds. For example, our Google Earth Engine tool has this data constantly streaming, and it's free for researchers, scientists to use to basically build algorithms, build AI models, so that they can do monitoring with dynamic data that's coming down, add their own data and monitoring data from the ground to build insights and build maps that can be used at the local level. And so, yeah, all of these tools are available for any researcher in the Asia Pacific region, and you know, they can get started just like anyone else in the world.
Thank you so much, Karen. Sheila, let's get back to you. You heard the sentiments of Rosamond. How can we really tackle air pollution today, especially with the issues that Rosamond raised?
So I think Rosamond already mentioned one, which is, you know, strengthen the monitoring systems. And Karen already talked about some of the work UNAP and Google Earth are doing together. I think beyond that as well, a key issue is for governments to set the regulatory environment. We've been working with governments to set in place the kind of standards for vehicle emission standards, but to set in place also the regulatory environment and the incentives for investment towards cleaner technologies, cleaner energy sources, using pushing, you know, electric mobility to move to energy efficient products in the building and construction sector, and also to look and see how their public spending is going towards setting in place and investing in infrastructure that would enable these technologies to flourish. So we still see, on the one hand, while one government may decide that, okay, we're going to do some monitoring, on the other hand, it may be engaging with a donor country to look at, you know, what kind of debt it can secure for infrastructure that is completely unsustainable. So it's almost a schizophrenic situation. And I think that what would be interesting to see is how are we moving in tandem from the monitoring to the regulatory environment, the incentives for the finance industry to be able to come in, and for investors to be able to invest in cleaner technologies alongside government. One of the things with some of our finance partners, they're saying that, well, it would be great to be able to have public-private partnerships where the movement towards sustainability is supported by governments. And so it would be a very interesting space going forward to see if we can capitalize on this interest and potential growth in this area.
Which particular countries are offering, you know, these kinds of generous incentives?
So I wouldn't be able to put my, let's say, at the top of my head, you know, you're putting me a bit on the spot, but if I were to say which spaces are there, let's just take, we've heard recently the European Investment Bank is becoming known as the climate bank, and it lends funds, you know, globally, not just in Europe as something. We're seeing a lot of players. We're seeing who are interested in coming into the space. We're seeing development banks willing to look and seeing how can they improve the environment. In India, I'll give you one example. The government has set up a Sustainable India Finance Facility. And one of their first initiatives has been a very large I think it's close to $1 billion investment vehicle for what's called zero budget farming. It's organic farming. So if that is successful, it will remove emissions from the agriculture sector that we heard Pakistan talking about when they talk about, how do you keep this agricultural sector more sustainable so that you see less emissions from that sector. So that's just maybe one example, but what we're seeing is a growth in terms of some countries willing to move, but they're moving in, let's say, areas. Some are doing monitoring, some are trying to create a regulatory environment, some have investors willing to invest, but there's not enough investment. So the whole issue is to how to bring that together so that the momentum can really leapfrog to another level.
Are there some countries in the Asia Pacific region that it's not even a priority?
I would say that all countries are actually looking at it, but they're doing it in a piecemeal basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're seeing little pockets of very interesting work. I remember seeing the bus rapid transit system working in Jakarta. I mentioned the India Sustainable Africa Finance Facility, Sustainable India Finance Facility. We're seeing, investments coming in from the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, for example, on some clean energy investments. But we're not seeing it in a more comprehensive way that really pushes that momentum forward.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Matsuzawa-san, let me get back to you. Air pollution, as we've been discussing with Sheila, with Rosamund and Karen, basically transcends borders. In your point of view, how can we strengthen cooperation to improve air quality in Asia Pacific?
Thank you. Yes, I think the knowledge sharing and the experiences sharing is effective to improve the air quality in Asia Pacific region. And to this end, government of Japan continuously has worked with multilateral framework, including this APCAP. And also we have worked with Climate and Clean Air Coalition and Clean Air Asia. And regarding the monitoring, regional monitoring network, we have worked with the acid deposition monitoring network in East Asia, together with China, Korea, and in Indochina Peninsula countries. And we, Japan, will continuously commit to this regional framework to develop the monitoring capacity and regulatory capacity. Over to you.
Thank you, Zawa-san. Rosamund, let me get back to you before we wrap up our panel discussion. Justice has been served. Will your advocacy to fight air pollution continue?
Absolutely. There's an opportunity for countries to consider now and prioritize transformation measures in their country's recovery plans. A green low carbon recovery could cut as much as 25% of emissions by 2030, and for support social economic recovery and have the potential to create 191 million new jobs, and the US 3.6 trillion of additional revenue by 2030. We shouldn't see this. Whenever you mention green, we shouldn't be scared of this. This is the way forward. My advocacy will continue because this is a public health crisis. We need to view air pollution on the same level as we viewed COVID. They're both pandemics and they're both airborne, and they both seem to interact with one another. So this is our opportunity. We need to commit to carbon neutrality. Air pollution and climate change, they are intrinsically linked. Without one, we are not going to get the other. And all the major air pollutants have a direct impact on the climate. And most share common linkages, we've already had with greenhouse gases, especially related to the combustion of fossil fuels. So for the sake of our children's future, we need to put this first. And we have seen, I've watched the world as they've got together to come up with a vaccine. And we know when there's a crisis, it's not that governments can't do it. COVID has shown us they can do it, but they need to take this seriously. And the urgency is what I'm urging everyone. I think the difference between COVID and air pollution, COVID is very immediate. So a bit like my daughter became ill when she was almost 7. So it's a drip, drip, drip. And I have started to say the difference between COVID and air pollution is air pollution isn't shutting down economies like COVID did, but is just as dangerous. And, WHO believes there is no safe limit whatsoever. And a study in 2019 showed that 8.8 million people worldwide die prematurely due to air pollution. So this is a crisis that will not go away. And I feel after what I've been through, it is for me to highlight and keep on reminding people to what does Build Back Better mean? They need to have human health as their number one priority.
So much, Rosamund. And Karen, Google Earth has done a lot so far and is helping a lot of developing nations in Asia with access and availability of data on air pollution. What more can we expect from Google Earth in terms of initiatives going forward?
Well, I mean, it's hard to follow the words of Rosamund. I'm very inspired, and I think one of the things I want to commit to in my career and my job at Google is bringing our company's abilities to help communities and families and citizens and cities make decisions about what's happening on their streets and what's happening in their local air quality. And so we've made a commitment to help 500 cities tackle air pollution and reduce a gigaton annually starting in 2030 and beyond. Air pollution, like Rosamund said, is very linked to that. Air pollution is a necessary data set to help cities act quickly, and a lot of cities are asking for it. And so you can expect us to keep helping and keep trying to bring data and insights that will help cities and communities tackle this problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you so much to our panelists for today, Karen, Sheila, Matsuzawa-san, and Rosamund, for your powerful insights and inspiration and the crucial work that you do for people and for the planet. And it is indeed inspiring to hear that even though we are going through this crisis, transformative change for clean air and blue skies is still within reach. Thank you so much for joining us for this high-level plenary session on Build Back Better for healthy air, healthy planet. And before we end this high-level plenary session, joining us now is a journalist who has been using her talent to tell stories to inspire and motivate action. Let us all please welcome Miss Leslie Finlay. Leslie.
Thank you, Rico. And thank you to today's organizers and speakers for highlighting the urgency and real impacts of this issue. So I'm going to start today with something that's called the finite pool of worry. It's a theory in psychology, and it states that as humans, we have a hard limit when it comes to our emotional resources. We're drawn to problems that are visible and imminent. And as we start worrying about one threat, it just diminishes our concern and even awareness of others. So to put this into some context, a few years ago, I was getting coffee with friends in Bangkok. And I remember how they were casually comparing brands of air purifiers and checking forecasts for the air quality before making plans. And I nodded along, but it wasn't really a reality that I related to. See, I live in Koh Tao. It's a small island in the Gulf. And here, our community's worries revolve around things like overfishing, declining water quality, plastic waste. But air pollution is not really within our finite pool of worry for now. And that's definitely a feeling we're all really familiar with, only being able to worry about so much. But that's how problems get normalized, when particulate matter is just a casual talking point over coffee. Even though in areas like Chiang Mai and Bangkok, research shows how air pollution shortens life expectancy rates, overburdens hospitals, threatens the country's tourism economy, and it can even lead to greater risk of mental health issues. But even by highlighting these human impacts, I'm bringing us all into a finite worry trap. Prioritizing cleaner air in these urban hubs is essential. And while they get the lion's share of attention, they're not the only place in Thailand facing air quality challenges. So I recently spoke with an engineer based in Pattani, which is a province in the southwest of Thailand. He said that at present, the region's pretty underdeveloped, and likewise, their air quality issues are quite small in scale. He said that local organizations, like one called Trash Hero, have focused instead on building awareness about the dangers that result from poor waste management, particularly burning plastic. Local families have been burning household waste for generations, but as plastic became more ubiquitous, the practice didn't just stop, it started creating a new public health threat. So this engineer explained how Trash Hero has made a really big impact through education. But this awareness has had other outcomes as well. People quickly realized how hard it is to avoid single-use plastic in your life. And then there's the question of what to do with it. In spite of a household's best efforts to avoid burning, there just isn't sufficient waste management in the region. So waste to energy emerged as a solution, and it's an attractive one in theory. But while it's unclear how many will actually get funded, this engineer estimates there's at least 100 waste incinerator projects in planning stages throughout the region. And he says there's growing local concern for these projects moving forward without effective waste management in place. That organic waste can get mixed in with plastic and even hazardous materials. And if you're incinerating all that together, you're not getting clean energy. Instead, the risk for dangerous emissions spikes, and in some cases, polluting materials like coal get snuck into the mix just to make the process work. It's just a different version of the same problem, and now it's on a grander scale. So the story isn't meant to point any fingers. Pattani itself has its own finite pool of worry, and it's at capacity. According to the UNDP's Human Achievement Index, the province falls in the lowest category on a range of metrics, including participation in their own community's decision-making. They're caught in the middle of a paradox, one between finding ways to advance and solve local problems and handling the cost of that progress. That's why for today's clean air solutions to be truly sustainable, they need to be scalable and inclusive of all Thai communities' challenges. It's about extending our own pool of worry, making sure that we're bringing everyone along as we build back better for cleaner, healthier air. After all, development at the expense of air quality isn't a unique narrative, but Thailand's approach to cleaner air, that story can be. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Leslie, for that inspiring visual storytelling and motivating all of us that we have to act now against pollution. And we would like to thank everyone for joining us for this high-level plenary on Build Back Better for Healthy Air, Healthy Planet. I'm Rico Hizon, and it has been a privilege and an honor being your moderator for the opening and high-level plenary session of the third Asia-Pacific Clean Air Partnership Joint Forum. And we will be taking this short break, but we will see you again at 1:30 p.m. for our next session. Clean Air for All, Strengthening Women and Children's Engagement. To all our delegates, thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you there. Bye for now.